All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. We're here today to discuss a discrepancy of roughly $39 billion. To put that in perspective, that's the gap between the two estimates we're debating today is larger than the GDP of Estonia, Iceland, or Paraguay. It is much larger than the entire global recorded music industry. Depending on who you believe, the translation industry is either a massive, omnipresent utility woven into the fabric of global commerce, or it is a highly specific, competitive B2B service sector fighting for margins. To help us find the truth, I have brought in two people whose opinions actually move the market. Introducing first, Renato Beninato. If you spent more than 40 hours in this industry, you know his name. With over 30 years of experience, he is the co-founder of Nimdzi Insights, a former executive at some of the world's largest LSPs, and a past president of ELIA and ALC. He literally wrote the book on our sector, The General Theory of the Translation Company. He is the strategist who sees language as utility, counting the total economic footprint of global communication. He argues that our industry is massive, largely hidden, and worth upwards of $71 billion. I'll let Renato clarify that number. Renato, welcome to the ring. And on the other hand, introducing Florian Face, representing what we call the realist view. Florian is the co-founder and managing director of Slator, the undisputed source of financial intelligence for the language industry. Before Slator, he was an executive at CLS Communication in Zurich in Asia. And when private equity firms and institutional investors look at our industry, they look through Florian's lens. He tracks the receipts, the M&A multiples, and the audited financials. He built the Bloomberg of our sector. He argues for precision, defining the addressable market closer to 30 billion. Florian, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So gentlemen, we are not here to check your math. We know you can both count far better than I can. We're here to check your logic. The audience today includes investors, CEOs, and startup founders. They need to know which map to follow. And this is the rule. We want deep thoughts today, but we are live, and we will be giving you specific time windows for each answer so we can cover the investor, operator, and philosophical angles. So I'm going to start with a question to Renato. And for this question, you have 3 minutes, and I'd like you to define the battlefield. How big is the market? And can you briefly walk us through the methodology of what exactly you're counting? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you for inviting us. It's always a good opportunity and an excellent chance to talk to Florian. I'm a fan, follower of one of the first clients of Slator in the past, right?
That's
so let me give you a little bit of background in this. I started following and trying to measure the industry in 2005 when I was the co-founder of CSA Research. Today it was Common Sense Advisory. And it was based on a challenge that I received when I was the VP of sales at Berlitz. Berlitz, in the year 2000, was the biggest translation company in the world. My boss, the CEO of Berlitz GlobalNet, which was the translation division of Berlitz, came to me one day and said, Lisa says that the industry is $29 billion. You are the VP of sales of the biggest translation company in the world. We make $130 million a year. Where's the rest? And at that time, I thought that $29 billion was a crazy number. It was absurd. Eventually, I decided to start tracking this industry. I started with a ranking of the top 10 language companies in the world. And I started looking at this from different angles. And I had this $29 billion number to decipher and trying to understand where it came from. The first thing I did was take the classic Fermi approach, right? Enrico Fermi, the physicist who was in the Manhattan Project, has this classic problem. He's asked, how many piano fine-tuners are there in Chicago? And by approximation, he gets to a number that is really close to the reality. So I tried to use the same approach at the time, looking from the supply side, looking from the translator income side, looking from government spend side, looking from different angles and trying to reach a number for the industry, looking at comparable industries. You brought up some examples of different industries. And I came up back then in 2005 to something like $32 billion as the size of the industry, which is what Slator tracks today as total addressable market. What did I include? How did I look at this? There is a visible part of the market, which is the revenue of the key players in the industry, those that are, at that time, there were more publicly traded companies, so it was easier to triangulate and gather some of that information. But over time, most of them went private, and it became harder. But we are able to collect, get some idea of what it is, and then look at, there is a technology component, there is a government spend component, there are hidden companies that you never heard of. 3 years ago, we came out with Sorensen, an $800 million company that nobody was tracking, and it was there generating this revenue for over 25 years. So it's a complex environment. There are multiple ways for us to look at it, and I don't want to go over time. This is how I started looking at the industry. That's basically it. I think that we overlook sometimes a lot of opportunities. There are in-house translators in certain organizations. There are, you look at the European Union, just the European Union in Brussels spends over close to 3 billion euros in translation only, right? And not all of this is outsourced. You have large enterprise that have in-house translators, and these people are in the market. They are competing for salaries, they're competing for resources, and so on. And there is another part of the industry that we're not tracking, which are the large technology providers, Google, Microsoft, Alibaba. These are offering machine translation solutions to the market, LLM fed these days, and they process trillions of words every year, and they get paid for that, and that's part of the market too. So there are cuts. I don't think that Florian is wrong. He looks at a certain part of the market, and I tend to look at it in a more expensive way. Let's put it, to use your word, even though I think I'm the realist. And many people are pessimists. I'm not a pessimist.
Before I hand it over to Florian and Renato, just so I can clarify, so what is your figure for the total addressable market?
So for 2025, what we predicted in the Nimdzi 100 last year was $75.7 billion. And we're tracking our prediction for 76 from last year. We're still collecting data. The next few weeks, we're going to publish our Nimdzi 100 again. We're tracking, we're close to $80 billion in revenue. And to give you some perspective, $80 billion is the size of the bicycle market. It's the size of Citibank or something like that. There are companies that are the size of our market.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much. And I'm going to hand it over to Florian. Florian, you have 3 minutes. Give us the counter map. What is the total addressable ceiling for you? And what are you explicitly excluding, to stay precise?
All right. I mean, 80 billion is like the size of Apple's quarterly earnings these days, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, yeah, we did a pretty big exercise last year where we kind of redrew the map as AI is really opening up a bunch of new markets here. And so we actually took a step towards Renato. So we went from about 25 billion to now 31.4, because we included, in addition to language conversion, also mode conversion and language generation, right? Because the boundaries of the market, even in a narrower sense, are actually kind of getting a little blurrier. So what's important to us is really that we have a figure, a market figure that is addressable. So the A in TAM, right? Total addressable market. Originally, look, when we did this, it was about, I think it was about 2016 or 2017. So it was demand side. We built our model, estimated language solutions and tech spent by company, triangulated it in like a million different parameters, looked at account size. So that's kind of demand side. Then we put together our language service provider index, LSPI, which that's the supply side. I think currently if you tally up all the revenue there, we get to about $9 billion. So that's would be about 35% of our TAM. So demand side, supply side, and really putting the addressable in the TAM. And so let's go through the addressable portion a little bit here. So just to give you a few examples, when you look at, we now call them LSIs and LTPs, language solution integrators and language technology platforms, right? So inside our scope would be, for example, an LSI or an LTP selling to an enterprise. That's clear, right? But also in would be an LTP selling to an LSI. So if you're, have a TMS and you're selling it to, a translation company, an agency, and an LSI, that's in. LSI selling to LTP also in. What's out though is an LSI selling to another LSI, because there's this subcontracting cascade, and we purposely made the decision to exclude that. Now, what we also don't include would be like these foundation AI builders, like OpenAI selling to an LTP or LSI, or rather, these companies using an OpenAI service, or like these translation as a feature. Renato, you were including this, but for us, like the translate button in Google Doc would not be included, or even an enterprise deal by the Googles of this world, or like Figma launching AI translation, that will be excluded. And also, we don't count the data labeling service, which has been a pretty good business for a ton of companies out there. We purposely excluded that. So we look at the TAM, which means it's spent that we feel can be won by the market, and I think that's helpful to the people that talk to us.
All right, that's awesome. So just to make sure that I get the difference correctly. So Renato was saying we're talking about a market that's in 2026 heading close to 80 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And Florian, your number in 2026 is closer to
probably 31.
31. Okay.
Yeah.
So the gap is even bigger than I anticipated. So we're talking about almost a 50 billion gap between the two methodologies. And now I want to hand it over to you again, Florian, to really look at Renato's map, looking at how he counts internal spend and some of the unverified long tail. And from your perspective, what's dangerous or wrong with that approach, and why is that ghost money, and what are the consequences that you believe are not good about that approach in general?
As I said before we started, like I love the contentious angle you're trying to build here. We're even wearing the same shirt, so or a similar one. No, but like, look, internal spend, I think it's actually quite fair to count it if you know how to count it, or if you're confident you know how to count it. I think we just never felt confident that we knew how to count it. Like we feel confident with the market that we're looking at. We never felt comfortable counting the internal spend. And then, if you're taking these market figures to inform your strategy, I think there's nothing dangerous in taking a high number. I think you maybe start to worry. You can start to worry if you're like a 20, 30, or $40 billion company, and then you're starting to see the end of the market. But the biggest company in this space is like a bit more than $1 billion. So I don't think there's anything dangerous in looking at a large figure. Yeah. So that would be my, I guess, reply to that.
Okay. So in your opinion, totally fine having a large figure. You don't think that presents any kinds of issues?
I don't think so. And I mean, 30 billion is a pretty large figure already, right?
Yeah.
So.
All right. What about you, Renato? When you look at more of an addressable perspective, do you find any problems with that perspective?
You see, the concept of addressable is very interesting, because it's how much you can get, right? And so if you look at it as a zero-sum game, and that the only way that you're going to grow or develop your business is by taking business away from somebody else, that's an approach in stagnant markets. I still believe that the language industry is a growth market. And the reason why, even though we are growing at a lower rate than we have grown traditionally, our industry has the benefit of growing through three different vectors, right? We grow not only by the increasing content or volume, which is where every industry grows, but we also grow by the number of languages that are translated, and we also grow through the proliferation of platforms. So the same content is presented in different formats, needs different translation. If you translate the same movie for dubbing and for subtitling, these are two different types of translation. And you add to it the closed captioning, which is a third way of dealing with language in this process. So I lost my train of thought. Growth. I forgot what I was going to say. Ask the question again.
Sure, no problem. No, my question is, so what? And this kind of leads me also to the next one, but it's good that you respond again, which is, I'm happy that you guys are super buddies and you guys agree on not contending. Awesome. But from my perspective, it's a really different world that I'm looking at if I'm looking at these different definitions of what's addressable, right? So Florian is looking at things that he considers to be actually addressable, and you're looking at, let's say, the overall size of the market as a whole.
Thank you. I got my train of thought back. So the point that I wanted to make was that in my experience, I've been in this market for 40 years. What I see is that the replacement market is not the majority of the market. The majority of the market, the majority of the growth in the market comes from new services, new clients, new opportunities, like more languages and so on. If you look at the globalization scorecard by John Juncker, he says that in the last 10 years, the average number of languages for the top 120 websites that he tracks went from 12 to 33. So that's significant growth, right? The other element that I have seen this working with large enterprise, is that a company like Facebook, that is Meta now, when I started working with Facebook, they were barely starting to do translations. They were spending $700,000 a year. By the time that I left Moravia, and this is almost 10 years ago, they were spending with us at Moravia $27 million. The last figure that I heard from Facebook was closer to $100 million a year in localization and translation costs. So a company like Microsoft 20 years ago was spending $500 million a year in translation and localization. This is new content, new revenue, new services, new stuff that is created from scratch. This is not a replacement market. It's a growth market in that sense. And when we have revolutions like we're having right now, when you have a event like generative AI coming into every industry, you have movements like this. You have creation of new companies. You have new platforms. You have new demand. And even though we have had in the last 3 years a lot of uncertainty, the growth is still there because the old rules don't work. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that if we have the opportunity. But we don't have the new rules yet. The new world order is not established, is not defined. So there's so much opportunity for new services. One of the things that I like to track and mention every time, everybody in this call must have seen, since a bunch of us are here on LinkedIn, there was a posting a couple of months ago for a localization manager position at OpenAI with a very high salary and so on. OpenAI started they didn't have a localization team. They used the founders. I had a conversation with Lukasz Kaiser from one of creators of the transformer model. And he was saying in the beginning, he was invited to check translations into Polish. And he said, I haven't used Polish in 40 years, and I was doing translations review internally at OpenAI. And now they have a localization department. It's the same thing at Perplexity, the same thing at Anthropic, Cohere. All these companies have localization departments. And these were companies that didn't exist or we didn't know about 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? So I think that there is a dynamic element that I have always seen as a pattern that drives creation of new content. And when I predict growth in the industry, I'm not looking only at organic growth. I'm looking at growth. I have a slide that I use in certain presentations that I like to show projections of the future, not as a line, but as a cone. Because it grows at different speeds in different directions, and it generates a different view of the future. That is, we tend to look at it as a flat line or as a straight line, and in reality, it's a bunch of lines growing at different speeds and in different directions. So I think that we are in one of those explosive moments again.
Okay. Very, very good. And now I'll hand it over to Florian to critique that, and basically now framing it from, and very good points, Renato, by the way, but now I'm wondering, right? Let's say I'm a private equity firm, and why is it better for me to take the smaller market perspective instead of chasing this bigger, Renato's conical view of growth and expansion?
Let me put a pin in this just for a couple of, for maybe 1 minute, and just take up a couple of the points that Renato mentioned. So I totally agree that it was so fascinating to see that like OpenAI and Anthropic and Perplexity were all hiring for localization managers, right? So it's ironic, kind of shows that, you know, translation localization is not a solved problem. It's not fully automated yet, etc. I do think that growth in these new companies is not offsetting all of the efficiencies on the kind of high volume content that we've been seeing over the past 3 to 4 years, as people were really pushing AI, and people got a lot more comfortable using AI. I think 4 or 5 years ago, if there was an error because you used MT, you know, people got into more trouble than today. I think there's a lot more, just managers are a bit more forgiving. Yeah, there's a lot more tolerance, right? So, and on our side, actually, maybe you get to speak to that. There is a market that's growing really fast, and that's the LTPs. Like, this is our scenario of going forward, is the tech-led growth, where, you know, it's just the volumes or the revenues are lower because it's tech, right? So you don't have these high volume but relatively low margin projects that you've historically had in the language industry. So I mean, there are pockets of this market that are growing incredibly. Every day we're coming across a new company. I'm like, okay, what, you guys raised 70 million for what exactly, right? So there's a lot of good stuff happening. You ask about private equity and like if they like our view. I really think it depends on what stage they are in kind of their investment journey, I guess, right? If you speak to them internally after they invested, or maybe before that, they would like to have a more conservative TAM estimate. They want to be, they don't want to be overly optimistic, especially the PE guys. I mean, there's a certain kind of financial engineering behind that they need to make work. So when you speak to them initially, probably a little more conservative, but of course, when it's time to sell, then they get all bullish, and they want to take Renato's number. Then it's much more helpful.
Florian, yeah. I'm sure you've seen the information memorandums of companies that are for sale, and I see some with your numbers, and I see some with my numbers. So it depends on what private equity is trying to do, and what you said is exactly the case. It depends. If they want to sell, they use big numbers. If they want to buy,
big numbers.
Small numbers.
It's a smaller number, right? Exactly.
Right. And again, I think you guys are reaching on a really important point. I'm not looking, and I don't think we're looking for a truth. I mean, what we're talking about is something, we're talking about the differences in these contexts and these differences in approaches. Like you and Renato are saying, right? If I'm buying, I'm looking for the smaller number. If I'm selling, I'm looking for the bigger number, and so on. But I guess, and this is already handing it over to Renato, and looking from the venture capitalist perspective, is why is it beneficial to look at this bigger number, to look at this more expansionist perspective? Like what are the benefits do you see? Because ultimately that's how I think it's more healthy to frame the discussion. I mean, I think there's certain benefits and also cons about each of these approaches. In your opinion, why, if I were, let's say, about to invest in the sector, why would you argue with me that it's better for me to take on this bigger number?
Gabriel, I wouldn't frame it that way, right? When I have conversations with private equity organizations and with analysts, the private equity firm will hire Bain or BCG or an Accenture to review and create a study for the market. And then they talk to Florian, they talk to me, they talk to Arl at CSA Research, and they try to gather a story that they want to build and frame to the investors, right? And in several conversations that I've had in the past, they go deep. They probe every information, every challenge, every conversation that we have, and they make a choice. So, like I said, I've seen books that are circulating in the market for companies that are for sale, where our numbers are there, and I've seen others with Slator's numbers. And it's their story that matters, not my story. I'm not selling anything. I'm providing data. I'm providing information. I don't have skin in the game. I look at this. I have our top 100 companies last year were about $14 billion in aggregate. So, which is about 20% of the size of the market that we had at that time. And I don't know how big it's going to be this year. And this is what helps us inform a little bit how the industry is going. I think that from an investor perspective, this is still a small market. There are, if you compare this to the advertising industry, if you compare this to the food industry with defense industry, even if you put it into 30 or 70, even $100 billion is not a very, very big market. We are a niche industry. We are a shared service. We are a transformation business. We don't create anything. One of the characteristics of the language industry is that we're constantly working on other people's content. Somebody wrote something in one language and we convert it to another language in different formats. So as a transformation business, as a pass-through business, people look at it, and if you want to put it in how investors think, they think into a window of investment that goes from, I don't know, 5 to 10 years at the most. Usually the average duration of a fund is 7 years, but they want to come in and get out within 3 to 10 years. And they use the information in a way that they can determine what kind of investment they make and what kind of exit they can get out of it.
Perfect. No, that makes a lot of sense. Florian, before I move to the next question, do you want to comment or reply to any of the statements that Renato made?
I guess just one point. In our market now, we do create something, right? So there is the generation aspect in there as well, whether it's the conversion of the mode or language generation, actually explicitly something we broke out. So this is mostly driven by what AI can now do. So in our view of the market, we do create, but yeah, and even translation. I used to, as a former translator, I used to really be proud of my little creations there when I did my translation. So,
Yeah.
but no, otherwise, let's move on because we.
Yeah, but I think that's enough. Only in that statement, I think that there's room for our next debate, whether we transform only or create. But anyway, that's another discussion. But want to hand it off again to Renato, just based on what you were saying. So, and by the way, I love your view, Renato. Makes me feel very optimistic. And I know that you say it's not optimism, it's realism, but I feel super optimistic. And you're talking about OpenAI, and you're talking about Anthropic and how they're creating localization departments and how they're new buyers. And my question to you is, I mean, in your view, because it's a growth scenario, it's more likely that I can find blue ocean customers. And if you're talking now specifically to agency owners, who's the specific buyer that you would say that the agencies are ignoring right now, considering this conical perspective on growth?
The market is very dynamic, Gabriel. There are multiple variables that drive the market according to the time. So right now, for example, something that we ignored for a while, and it's a huge growth market, is defense. Defense spend in Europe is skyrocketing, and there is a lot of opportunity. And I'm talking to LSPs that are making a killing in this space because there is concentration, there is demand, and it's international by nature, right? There are startups, and I don't like to talk so much about startups because startups are not good translation and localization buyers. They are bootstrapped, they have a lot of money, investment, and so on, but they don't really spend in localization. They spend in other things. But once they get established, when they become more mainstream, they immediately start spending in localization and translation. I think that an important topic for us, for the medium LSP, the small and medium LSP, the single language vendor, is what the transformation that I sense is coming next is that we're going to go through a period of disintermediation, where this layer of single language vendor is going to become irrelevant for the large LSP. They're going to use AI to replace this orchestration management layer that is there in the middle. And the small LSP, the single language vendor, will have to become a regional vendor or a multi-language vendor. There's no barrier to that. And they're going to go to the clients that the large LSPs don't want to deal with. When I was responsible for sales and marketing at Moravia, at one point we realized that we were not interested in clients under $250,000. So we got rid of 16 clients that were in that situation. Those 16 clients went to regional vendors, small single language vendors, and so on. So, and I'm here in Porto at an ELIA conference, and I was talking to a couple of local LSPs. They're going for their direct clients because the LSP, they're being squeezed by the large LSPs. And the only way that they're going to survive is working with local markets. So we're going to have a reshuffle of how the market is going. This is a transition that takes time. Some people are going to suffer and disappear. We all heard that there are lots of LSPs for sale in the market, and people tend to look at this as a negative indicator that it's bad because companies are for sale. And I see this more as a passing of the baton. Is like our model is obsolete. I don't know how to change and operate in this new reality. Let me sell to somebody that knows. And in every transition, there are winners and losers. And I think that the winners are going to be the companies that understand that they need to transform the way they deliver services and work more. And a point that Florian brought before, and I think is very relevant, is the LTP, as he calls it. This platforms, they cannot grow on technology, and you are a good example of that, cannot grow only on revenue from technology. They need to provide services. So in our Nimdzi 100, last year we had DeepL. This year we know that we're going to have SmartLink. We're going to have other technology companies that are sharing their service revenue because it's significant. In some cases, it's even more significant than their ARRs.
For sure. No, that makes sense. But you said something that I found fascinating, Renato. You're talking about how even a red ocean situation where, like, let's say a few SLVs may be on the road to extinction, how that may even be something positive. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the market is shrinking. But getting that scenario, Florian, and if you were to critique it, you said something earlier that really also caught my attention. You're talking about the conversion of a lot of high revenue, low margin service revenue into lower revenue, higher margin tech revenue. And my question to you is, do you see the scenario that Renato provided the same? And if so, is this industry becoming a Shark Tank, and is it all about operational efficiency and tech stack, or is there room for cozy niches like we had in the past?
I mean, maybe they're not very cozy, but there's definitely a ton of niches, right? I mean, this is how you can survive. If you're in the LSI business, you got to be a real expert at what you're doing, or you have to have a piece of technology that's incredible. I think in terms of, you mentioned operational efficiency. I think a lot of the LSIs are super lean already. I mean, they're very optimized for what they do in terms of the operations. But now with AI, with all these tools, there's a lot of potential to embrace this new technology. You just got to make sure you don't break things. You don't upset your existing customers too much, right? There's this, it's a bit of an innovative dilemma, right? I mean, you're making money with clients that are currently happy, that are paying you good money, that you make a decent 5-10%, whatever margin off of, right? But you kind of sense that it's probably not going to last forever, right? So you need to keep innovating, but maybe some of your clients are way more conservative than you are. So you have to kind of figure out, as an LSI, you have to figure out a way, okay, how do I innovate on the one side, on the one hand, maybe take some of that margin money and some of those profits and build something that's really innovative and maybe trial it with clients that are open to that. But on the same, at the same time, also keep my existing clients happy and still make money with them, right? And it's very difficult right now to kind of strike that balance. And you can't, again, I think these LSIs they're very optimized and very lean already. I mean, it's not, you know, I remember maybe back in the mid 2000s or early 2010s, some of them are not lean at all. You could have run I don't know, any run-of-the-mill Kaizen project, and you probably could squeeze, a lot of margin out of it. I think those days are over. Now they're very lean.
And just a follow-up question. So in your definition of, let's say, service revenue being converted to tech revenue, do you see the market shrinking or stabilizing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, the services, the portion that goes to tech is revenue lost. Right now, I do subscribe to the growth view also, that there's a ton of new use cases that are popping up. I mean, just think about all the AI dubbing, or maybe like tweaking the AI dubbing or tweaking the voice that goes into the AI dubbing. But, you know, those are not, at this point in time, not billions or tens of billions of dollars that are available for some of these LSIs.
So I think one thing to keep in mind is that the value in the services is moving from what we were selling over time, scarcity, right? You need to have the right translator with the right language pair, with the right expertise, and available at the right time to do the projects and so on. So I ran a vendor management organization for a while. You were dealing with scarcity. You needed to find people to do the job and keep them and pay them to do that part. That task-based work, that's automated. AI, let's not judge, let's not get into the nitty-gritty details of quality and things like that. In theory, today, you can run $1 million project, a million-word project in a matter of hours or days with AI and get a decent output that you need then. And this is where the value comes, is in the second and third boxes. The scarcity part, the value of the translation, that goes down. But the coordination effort, the project management, the integration, the getting the content from here to there and in the right format at the right time and so on, that increases in value because the complexity increases. And the other part is the risk mitigation, right? If I am in a healthcare environment or life sciences environment, if I am in legal or things like that, I need to deal with compliance. I need to deal with real risk. And the value of the LSP now is not the ability to deliver, is the ability to guarantee that what you deliver is correct, is the right quality, and doesn't present a risk for the company. So you can now, and this is where the conversation is going to, we're going to spend a lot of time talking in the next couple of years, is this transition away from the per word pricing and finding a new model, because the scarcity economy is disappearing. That part of the process is disappearing. And coordination and risk mitigation theoretically have more value and are more expensive than the translation part of the business. So this is where I think the dialogue and the discussion is going to shift into in the next few years, is how does this model that is still there and is going to be there for a long, long time, because you don't replace a model overnight like this. And we're already seeing stories of companies that went full AI and came back. We all heard the stories about Klarna and about Salesforce that fired a bunch of people to replace them by AI and then hire them back. But we hear this in the translation space. An anecdote that I heard recently from one of our clients is that they lost a legal firm to DeepL just for less than a year later, the client coming back and saying, I charge $500 an hour. Why am I doing a task that I can outsource for $30 an hour, right? Mm-hmm. So common sense comes back, and the value goes to this coordination and risk mitigation, and just instead of the task of translating words, leveraging fuzzy matches and things like that.
Agree. And we're going to switch gears for a little sec just to make sure all our audience is awake and everybody can stretch and follow up with the discussion. This is a set of a few rapid fire questions. So just a yes or no answer. And I'll start with the first one, and Florian can go first. Renato can follow. Florian, will we see a $5 billion LSP by 2030?
Nope.
Renato?
No.
Okay.
No.
Is prompt, second question, and this time we'll start with Renato, go to Florian. Is prompt engineering already a significant billable service in 2026?
No, I don't think it is, and I don't think it's going to be. I think that this is a task. Well, you wanted just yes or no.
Just yes or no for now. Florian?
No, not in the narrow sense. I had to add that.
Okay. Now, something that Renato was hinting at, and Renato can take this one first. Does the word remain the unit of currency in 5 years? Yes or no?
It will coexist. It's no as the majority, yes, because it is an easy way to measure things.
Florian?
Yes, but I wish no.
All right. And then Renato also hinted at this. So who wins in 5 years? A tech company that sells services, a service company that builds tech, or a pure tech company? Renato,
You want
please.
to go first, Florian?
All right. Who wins? I guess in the tech side, an LTP with like a really defensible tech moat, to use that term. And then for the LSIs, I think an LSI must have scale, quite some scale to do all that integrating. That's the I in LSI.
And Renato?
I believe that the service component is the permanent element. So technology is going to be important, but technology changes, and if it changes a lot, you saw Transperfect buying Unbabel, right? It's a good example of a large service technology leading with the services buying the technology to fill in the gap because there is an opportunity, right? So I think that the service company has an advantage over the technology company.
So now taking a step back, right? And we've kind of dissolved the idea that there is a single truth. We've talked about these different perspectives, the different ways that both of you contextualize the different sizes of the industry. But I want to push you guys a little bit further, and starting with Renato. So if you had to choose, like you were waking up one day and you have to choose, looking at the market as a 30 billion market or as an 80 billion market, why do you think it's better or healthier or more productive to think about the bigger number instead of the smaller number?
I don't think it's an issue, Gabriel. When I started in this space, I was attacked in the beginning for people who were telling that my number was too small and my number was too big. Okay. And I said, these are benchmarks, right? This is my number, that is his number. We have here Luigi Musi will have another number. He says it's ridiculous that we're measuring this kind of stuff. The point is that pick this number and discount 50%, add 20%, and make it your number. It's relevant for the people who want to use the number. We give a starting point, a benchmark. If you agree, great. If you disagree, that's fine. Use your parameter to adjust that number to your reality. That's what I would say.
Do you agree with that, Florian? Is it just a number that has, whatever purpose people have, or do you think it has implications or reverberations to think of the industry as 30 billion or 80 billion?
As I said before, it becomes an actual problem for you if you're a $40 billion company and you feel that you're operating in this market in a very narrow sense. Then you're like, okay, I probably should look outside. I mean, for us, it's a very meaningful number, right? Because we know every nook and cranny of how this number came about. So, like, for us, it's a very important number. We in a sense, we advise people based on it, etc. But I mean, if others want to have different numbers, that's totally fine. I also don't, optimistic versus narrow. I mean, I think our view in many ways is also very optimistic. And if it were not, like, I don't know why it would conflict with Renato's optimistic outlook. So I don't think it's kind of mutually exclusive there. I guess if you look at the market from Slator from a realistic point of view, you want to stay alert, right? You want to err maybe on the side of caution when looking at a market, because it's very, very, very competitive out there. So so optimistic, yes, but also realistic.
Cautiously optimistic.
I just want to
cautiously optimistic, and sorry, there's so many pockets of growth, but also pockets of destruction, especially at the moment. I mean, you may end up being in a pocket of complete disruption and destruction, or you may all of a sudden find yourself getting a $10 million contract from somebody that I mean, it's super dynamic.
This is exactly the point that I was going to make, Florian. It's like I heard just last week that because of this ICE stuff that is happening in the United States, there is an additional $100 million contract for interpretation services out there because the demand caused by lots of arrests and things that are happening increased the demand for interpretation services for immigrants in law enforcement situation. This is a market that was created out of nothing in the last year, right? So these are things that are dynamic, that are happening all the time. It's a war here. It's a political change there. It's another technology that comes around. We hear a lot of AI is having a significant impact in the pharmaceutical market, creating new medicines, new I don't know exactly the word, composites or new proteins and things like that. And this needs, because these are regulated environments, they need to be approved. They need to be submitted to different agencies in different countries for approval. That creates more demand that was not mapped in the market. And I think that the most important, from my perspective, when I look at the numbers, I want to see, based on the data that we get, what is the trend? What is the growth rate? I used to track the market at an average of 7% growth a year. We reduced it to 6.5%. Last year, we projected a growth at 5%, which is very, very, very healthy growth for any industry, because we have this luxury of having three vectors that are always pushing our industry in that way.
Yeah, and again, I've kind of given up on the idea to get you guys to fully disagree, but when I hear you guys' words, I'm seeing very different worlds, and I'm gonna purposely put some words into both of your guys' mouths, and you guys can tell me if I'm crazy here. But so far, what I've taken from Florian's perspective is that the market is under a huge squeeze, that a lot of service revenue is disappearing. It's becoming transformed into tech revenue and tech opportunity. But the overall vibe is of pressure. Sure, you can find yourself in a little pocket here or there of something that's really positive, but there is tremendous pressure. And yeah, it's a complicated moment. When I hear Renato talk, I don't feel that much pressure. You did talk about some of the destruction that's involved, how SLVs have to become now, have to address maybe their final clients or reinvent themselves. But the growth scenario kind of makes me feel more at ease, particularly like it doesn't seem like you're seeing the market decrease in revenue for the coming years. And the reason why I say this is, even though, and I understand that it's not that one of you needs to be right, but when I wake up every day, the way that I look at the world shapes my decisions, shapes how I feel, shapes how what I decide to invest in, what I decide to do. And first, I want to ask both of you, am I exaggerating these different perspectives, or is what I'm saying kind of mapping out somewhat accurately what you both described?
I think you describe it somewhat accurately, other than I think you made it sound like the winner pockets are smaller than we think they are. I think there's a ton of winning going on out there, right? And maybe you could argue that when we're seeing our market not growing, or in certain pockets even decreasing, maybe some of that spend actually wanders into more the unaddressable part that Renato still addresses, right? So when big tech's taking over certain parts, when YouTube launches AI dubs natively, things like that, right? So it wanders from what we would count as addressable into something that's still there, and maybe even at like a 10x scale, but it's no longer something that we want to put a dollar figure on. So, yeah.
Well, the technology part usually goes and covers the type of translation that nobody was ever going to pay for, right? It was never addressable, because it's like a LinkedIn post. Nobody's going to pay to translate a LinkedIn post. But there is LinkedIn spends $300 million a year with Microsoft for machine translation, right? Google sells machine translation to several users in tokens, in different metrics that we don't use, but that's definitely part of the spend in translation that the enterprise spend, right? Google Ads and things like that are spent with technology companies that make some money out of that, and they're part of our market. This for a company like Airbnb, the money that they spend in machine translation is part of their budget as much as the money that they spend in human translation. The prices are different, the conditions are different, but they're still part of the market, and that's still budget that the clients spend. What I think is when I talk about growth is there is a sense when I have conversation with people, they say that it's terrible, that they're losing business, that things is going it's horrible, the market is going to crash. And then when I look at the numbers that they submit, they still grew. The majority of the companies that we tracked last year went up in revenue, or were even. Some and there is another element here that we're not taking into consideration, is the valuation of the dollar. We're tracking the industry in dollars, and the euro appreciated a lot. And it's not the euro that appreciated, the dollar devalued a lot because of the current policies in the government. And that has an impact because in dollar revenues, the market has grown more than in local currency. So there are many variables that affect that element of growth, but I still believe because all of these technologies enhance communications. And by nature, whenever there is communication, whenever there is exchange of information, there is opportunity for translation. And this is where this business thrives. And I think that that's still expanding.
That's awesome. That's a great perspective. And since we're reaching time, and I know that our audience loves listening to your words, to wrap it up, I want to leave both you, Florian and Renato, with 1 or 2 minutes just to give a few words of wisdom in terms of what you consider to be important outlooks for 2026, like whatever you'd like to share. I mean, and you've already been giving lots of these over our conversation, and I'm so grateful for that. But if you had to, give one word of advice to our fellow listeners, what would it be? And you can take it first, Renato.
My message to our clients when we talk to them is move away from talking about output and talk about outcomes. This is the main change that AI helps us to do. Number of words, reuse, traditional metrics that we have used in the industry will tend to become irrelevant. Learn how to talk to your customers, listen what are their needs, why they're doing their projects, and not how. We need to stop talking about how we translate and need to focus on the why and the purpose and the value that this industry creates to the end user.
Very good words. And Florian, what would your words be?
I think I would encourage everybody to spend like 1 hour per day either building something with language AI or consuming something that uses a ton of language AI. Literally 1 hour a day, maybe 30 minutes a day, but a decent amount of time. So because I really think you need hands-on experience to craft a robust strategy for your specific company or in-house team or in-house localization team or in-house language service. I think if you're not working with these technologies on a day-to-day basis, you fall into either maybe the trap of like, oh, it's all hype, or it's like, oh, actually, maybe I'm going to be out of a job tomorrow morning. So spend an hour a day either building or using and get a realistic perspective.
Perfect. Well, I'm so grateful for both of your time and for all of the amazing words. I certainly learned a lot. This was an amazing debate. Couldn't get you guys to really disagree, but I'll try better next time. And thank you everybody for watching. It's been an honor and a privilege.
We'll ask the AI. Maybe the AI pinpoints a few disagreements here.
Thank you everybody, and till next time.
Thanks, Renato. Thanks, Gabriel.
Thank you.
Bye.